Well, I'm here in my backyard oasis. This is a place I love to come every evening. I come out here, I have my evening coffee, my evening cigar. I usually watch a Mets baseball game. They're beating the Marlins right now. And I wanted to take a break because this is something I've been thinking about, really focused on most of today. Jimmy Dore just did an episode talking about the farmers revolting in the Netherlands. Nobody in the national media is covering this anywhere. And it isn't just the US media isn't covering it. There are people online from other countries talking about, why isn't our media talking about this? Places like France, Italy. Over 40,000 farmers in the Netherlands are converging on their cities and on their government. You remember the tractor trailers in Canada, the Freedom Ride? Well, this is happening now in the Netherlands, and apparently this protest has been going on since 2019, according to Reuters. Yet it's in the last several days that it has really kicked up a new level. They have shut down airports. They have shut down local municipalities, local governments. It's outrageous. They are pushing back against the police that are trying to stop them. And so Jimmy Dore asked the logical question. Well, what is this all about? That you've got 40,000 farmers in tractors shutting down cities, shutting down turnpikes and thoroughfares. What's going on? Well, climate change. And you've got Jimmy Dore, who is a progressive, but in many ways, he has had some awakenings. He was one of the very first, even when conservative media still didn't know what to make of the new president, Donald Trump, and was he really a conservative? And he thrashed the members of the GOP and the rhinos that for years they tried to espouse and tell us that these guys were actually conservative. And then, Trump comes in the primaries and with his scorched earth policy, took those guys out at their legs, and that was that. And then he becomes president, and they hear all of this about Russia collusion. And at first, even the conservative media didn't really rush to President Trump's defense. Now, eventually they all got on board and they all figured out what was going on. Sadly, it was members of the left progressive media. I'm not talking about the lying legacy corporate corrupt media. I'm not talking about the clowns at CNN or PMSNBC or even the hacks at Faux News, formerly known as Fox News. I'm talking about the actual progressive media. People like Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, Aaron Mate, and others. I mean, these guys are committed progressive leftists. Yet right away they started reporting about Russia collusion. Something here doesn't seem right. And they saw through it immediately and began to report on it. They were ahead of the conservative media on that issue. And now I'm seeing Jimmy Dore, he's waking up on other things like, you want to get some really good reporting on what's going on with COVID and Dr. Fauci and Love Potion number 9, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm telling you, Jimmy Dore's all over that. He's been all over the proxy war with Russia using Ukraine. His overall conclusion is incorrect. He thinks it's all about helping our oil companies be able to distribute energy over Russia in Europe, but there's a lot more to it, and I discussed that yesterday, and I don't want to re-kick that up again. But he was talking about this farmers' revolt, and the fact that in the Netherlands, the government there has basically said that they have got to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 70% by 2030. Which is requiring farmers to reduce livestock by 40%. Now let that sink in. Let that sink in. These family farms that are 2, 3, 4, 5 generations deep and old. You know, I grew up, well, I should say, I actually pastored in upstate New York for 15 years in what was called dairy country. And we were watching the trend then that the independent small family dairy farms were going out of business and corporations were buying up the dairy farms. And in places like the Netherlands, they're used to having these, nice little mom and pop, family owned, small business farms, 40, 50 cows. Well, even at that level, understand that those kind of farms, they're breaking even. Those farmers aren't getting rich. And now you're saying they've got to cut their livestock in half. And there's all kinds of other regulations on them that if their farm is anywhere near, quote, a national park, they have to stop farming completely. Wait, what? I thought liberals were like vegans and into farmers markets and vegetables. So what is this all about? And of course, Jimmy comes to the conclusion that this is about corporations wanting to buy up the farms, et cetera, et cetera. That's a part of it. But that's not the whole picture. And so that's what I want to talk about, because we got things going on in this country right now where you can tell this is a rural setting. I am surrounded by farmers where I live now. This is not upstate New York. I lived 9 years in Florida. I am now in Northwest Ohio, and those of you that listen to my radio show know that I broadcast from an undisclosed grain elevator somewhere here in Northwest Ohio. I am surrounded by farm country. Lot of agriculture going on here. There is, believe it or not, there's cattle here, and a lot of horse farms here. A lot of vegetables being grown here, and the farmers are in a bad place right now. They can't get fertilizer. You think about the price of gas, and then you look at the size of some of these farm tractors. I have tractors that go by my house that some of these tractors look bigger than my house. I mean, this is some mammoth equipment, and the gas that it takes to run them and what it's costing them to run these tractors in the fields, and that's going to equate to the price of food, and then they can't get their hands on the fertilizer they need, and they're even having trouble getting grain and getting food for their livestock, and they're having trouble getting seed to plant into the ground. And then we've had over 20 plus food processing plants that have burned to the ground in 2022. And I wanted to do a quick check to see how many of these food processing plants in this country have actually just, vanished, poof, gone away. And the first page of my search were all these fact checkers from, factcheck.org and Reuters, and, the list just went on and on and on, debunking the conspiracy theories over the strange fires at food processing plants. I'm sorry. My instinct tells me immediately, when the entire first page is telling me that I'm not seeing what I'm seeing, then I know I am seeing exactly what I'm seeing. My grandfather used to have a saying, when you throw a rock into a pack of dogs, the one that yelps is the one that got hit. And you're circling the target when they start screaming, no, no, no. It's like when my kids were little, and they would come into my office in New York, and I always had candy, but I would hide the candy. But if they could find it, they could have it. So we played the hot, cold game. Oh, you're getting hotter. Oh, you're burning up. Oh, you're ice cold. And every once in a while, they could figure out Daddy was lying. Daddy was telling them that they were ice cold, when in reality, they were literally just fingertips away from where I had the candy hid. And that is exactly what our government's doing when they keep telling us, oh, no, you're not seeing this right. It's like all of the so-called COVID conspiracies, which, as many have pointed out, we're about 5-0 on that now. That all of those so-called conspiracies have actually been proven now to be correct. So we are seeing the food shortages. Go to your local supermarket. There is a particular flatbread that I eat, and I have been for the past 3 years after I got my diagnosis with diabetes, and I did not want to go the medication route. I was not going to spend the next several years on metformin before they finally weaned me off that and put me on insulin. No, nay, that wasn't going to happen. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes, is a condition brought on by poor diet choices. So over the course of 3 years, I have lost over 90 pounds. I work to maintain it. There's more I would like to lose. My A1C, which is about a 3-month cumulative of your blood sugar, mine is at about 4.5 right now. When I was first diagnosed with diabetes, my blood sugar at that point was over 300 and my A1C was 11. None of those are good numbers. So I regulate it with diet. And one of the things I introduced in my diet was I follow the GPS plan: no grains, no sugar, no starches, no potatoes. I started going to a flatbread. Now my kids hate it. My wife's not crazy about it. It's flavorless, tastes like cardboard. I got used to it. I absolutely love it. I can't find it anywhere. Not a single supermarket within driving distance of where I live, and I've got like 6 major supermarkets all within a 10-minute radius. Nobody's got it. Now there was a time I could go into that supermarket and I could fill up a tractor trailer with it. No more. And they have no answer about when or if it might ever never come back. And there's other food items that just aren't there, and what we're paying now for meat. And oftentimes you walk in there and I'm thinking, why do I feel like I'm looking at pictures from when I was a kid and they would show us pictures of the Soviet Union and how supermarkets were really empty, and we were getting propaganda that they were all really happy over there, when in reality they really didn't have stuff. And I'm thinking, we got this in the United States right now. And at what point do our farmers begin to revolt? We saw what happened in Canada when the truck drivers decided to revolt. If you've got food on your table, a farmer grew it. And if you went to the store to buy it, a truck brought it there. So you put the farmers and the truckers together, they literally can bring a nation to its knees. And these farmers, they can't hold out. These mom and pop farms can't make it. Now, there's a couple of things going on here. Yes, there is an agenda for corporations to buy up these farms. We had the lockdowns. It's interesting, isn't it? The mom and pop stores couldn't be open, but all the big box stores could be open. Now, that didn't make any sense to me when the lockdowns first hit. Even here in a so-called red state, my governor decided that he was going to try to be Andrew Cuomo. He was really going to do everything he could to out Cuomo. We were the first state to have a shutdown. We were the first state to close schools. And he would come on the TV every day and, I'm White Joanne and I'm protecting people because you don't know what to do. And at that time, I refused to follow any of it. I kept my church doors open. We didn't mandate anything there. If people wanted to sit next to each other, I didn't care. If they wanted to wear a mask and that's what they felt they had to do to be comfortable, if they didn't, they did. But we were going to be open. And I can remember thinking at the time, as I'm going into stores and, they had the lines outside Home Depot. We're only allowing 10 people in at a time, okay? In a, 50,000 square foot, building. And it was ridiculous. So they got us all standing on top of each other outside, which couldn't have a crowd inside. But all the mom and pop stores had to close. And I'm thinking, all right, if this is a so-called problem where we don't want to have mass congregants of people, well, wouldn't it make more sense to keep the small businesses open? Because they can't accommodate a lot of people at one time anyway. Keep the mom and pop hardware store open, close the Home Depot, because the Home Depot is going to attract mass amounts of people. And when I realized that was done deliberately, that the corporations were raking it in. You have any idea how much money Amazon made during lockdown? How much Walmart and all the big box stores made during lockdown? And a lot of those mom and pop businesses never came back, and that is on purpose. As I said yesterday, the reason they hate Vlad Putin and Donald Trump is not because they collaborated together, and it isn't because Vlad Putin is a communist. Leftists are communists. What they hate about Vlad Putin is he's a nationalist. And liberalism, the liberal world order, which the Biden administration is now admitting we must protect at all costs, which means you got to pay more at the gas pump and you got to learn to do without because we're going to protect the liberal world order. The liberal world order likes to do a couple of things. One, they love to create the illusion of free democratic elections. Hey, they even have elections in Havana. Don't forget that. They love corporate capitalism. The government and the corporate capitalists work together. The lockdowns were a major shift of more wealth into the hands of the few, as is the proxy war with Russia in Ukraine. Hate to point out the obvious. So you start putting all of this together now. And I know some of you, this is where I might lose you, but I want to talk to those of you specifically who might consider yourself a conservative, but you're an atheist. You don't really believe in this God stuff, and you'll listen to Pastor Marty because he doesn't bring up a lot of God stuff all the time in this setting, but I'm going to right now. You know, I come from a Christian faith system. If you were going to hang a label on it, it would be called Baptist. You know, we preach a second coming of Jesus Christ. You've seen movies and you've heard it fictionalized and talked about, an Antichrist and a mark of the beast and all of that. Well, stop talking and listen. Start looking around and start putting pieces together right now. We had a Love Potion number 9 mandate that you were then going to have to prove you had. You couldn't get into certain businesses without proving you had it. Now, I know it was only happening in blue states and in blue cities, but it was nonetheless being rolled out. This is what's going to happen. You're going to have this passport, this electronic passport. And I was one of the first ones to tell you, hey, this is being done in India, and you need to watch what's happening in India. Because in India, the passport was on their cell phones. Every citizen in India, courtesy of the government, is given an Obama phone. And if your vax status was considered not current, not only were you not allowed in businesses, don't miss this, but because in a place like India, many of the people depend on the government for their food. Bum, ba-dum, bum. Stay with me. Some of you are already starting to catch this, but stay with me. And if your vax status didn't ding in as current, you didn't get your food allotment. So I started to ask the obvious question. All right, they're trying to move us off of cash, actual money. Remember when the lockdowns first ended? You'd go into stores and at first they wouldn't take your cash. Oh, debit card only. I would leave cash. I very rarely use cash. I started using cash then because, like, you're up to something and this piece of paper actually says legal tender and is good for settling debts in the United States. So I would just start leaving cash on the counter and walking out. I even though I had the cards in my pockets, like, no. And then some places there was a coin shortage. Like, wait. How? Well, because of the lockdown. What? Okay. The mints were closed. Okay. But it isn't like coins begin to vanish and disappear. They're not edible. They're not consumable. So because we were all in a lockdown, it's not like we were out spending them anyway. So how is there now a shortage? And all of this push to do the cryptocurrency and the Bitcoin. And I said, here it comes. And I began to warn on my radio show and right here, they're going to tie the passport into your bank account. And they're going to make sure that if you aren't following every mandate, every regulation, if when they scan you, it doesn't read current, you don't have access to your bank account. You don't have access to your digital credit card. And they want to put everything that way, your driver's license, your literal passport to leave the country. But because Love Potion number 9 became such a, and I can't say failure, because I have to tell you here on YouTube, it's wonderful and it has done everything that it was promised to do. But because Bill Gates is saying it really didn't do what we promised. In fact, you shouldn't have to get 75 boosters. They began to pull back and roll back, which means they're gearing up. Their test run didn't quite work out like they hoped, but it's okay. These guys are patient and they will hit us again. And we will go through it again. And they will mandate again. And it won't be a suggestion, it will be compulsory. But they've got to get everything in step. See, like they use the pandemic as the excuse for the mandates, they will use climate change as the excuse to take over the farms. You know, these flatulating cows letting off too many greenhouse gases. They're cooking the planet. They got to go. You got Bill Gates buying up hundreds of millions of acres of farmland. And I don't believe it's because he's decided to give up computers and put on his Mr. Green Jeans bib overalls and get out a hoe and go out into a field somewhere and start planting corn and potatoes. No, nay. He's purposely buying up the farmland so that there isn't any. And he's not just buying it up here, he's buying it around the globe. He's invested billions into technology that turns crushed bugs into flavored meats. You know, lab-produced meats, genetically produced meats. Because we all know how well our labs are at taking care of us. The labs that come up with the chemicals that kill crabgrass and give us cancer. The labs that come up with, viruses. And now these labs are going to produce our food. Hey, where are all you so-called naturalists out there? Where are you people that, are really into, I have to have whole foods and organically grown. You understand, all of that now is on the chopping block. And it's all done on purpose. So now they're setting it up and structuring it in such a way you will need the government for everything. Your food. And the next time the next thing comes and they hand out the mandate and you will get it and you will carry the passport, whether in the form of your cell phone or in a chip on you, when we scan you, if it comes up with an incorrect code, you don't get your food that week. You don't have access to your bank account that week. You can't drive your car. The funny thing is the Bible has talked about that. 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, Revelation, the mark of the beast, and he who did not receive the mark could not transact any business and is considered a fugitive of the law. Still think that Bible's a bunch of crackpot nonsense? You're watching it play out. You need to start taking all of these quote-unquote separate events and realize there's nothing separate about them. And Bill Gates hasn't reneged on his idea of mass vaccination for the planet. He is smart enough to realize, though, the next time we do this, it needs to be, a one and done deal so that everybody lines up and does as they're told. As I told you before, the problem was it got out 5 years too early. They didn't have everything. So now they're in hyper overdrive to get everything set up and buy everything. I mean, not just the quote unquote magic elixir that would work, but they have to be able to control the food supply. They have to put you on a completely digital currency. See, everything has got to be digital, scannable, so that if you do not obey, they literally can turn your life and survival off. That's why it is important to pay attention to all of this. That's what's really happening. And so, yes, we do have farmers that are really facing it right now. And in Holland, they're fighting back. They showed up at one city hall, and you can find these video clips on YouTube. I have to be careful because we don't want them to start pulling it down, but Jimmy Dore has done an excellent expose on this, and he's got the clips of the farmers rolling up on a local city hall and with a tractor pulling a tanker that hauls manure, liquefied. They spray down the entire city hall in manure and basically said, here's your greenhouse gases. So when they talk about Green New Deal, it isn't really about climate change. It's about control you. That becomes, see, they always have to create a crisis, and then they have to be able to save you from the crisis. And what happens is people go into fear mode and panic mode, and then they just do what they're told. That's why so many people immediately bought into the hyperbole of the 2-year outbreak. Now, some of us fought back on it immediately. Others did not. But they're waking up. They're figuring out what happened. So it's important to understand that what you're seeing are not isolated, strange, segmented incidents. It all works together. And as Paul Harvey would say, you now know the rest of the story.